Hey everyone, welcome back to Botanic Haven, your favorite little corner of the internet dedicated to gardening, plant care, and creating those beautiful green spaces, whether that's a cozy indoor jungle or a stunning backyard garden that makes your neighbors stop and stare. If you're new here, so glad you found us. And if you've been with us for a while, you already know how much we love this time of year. That magical stretch right before spring truly kicks in, when every gardener starts eyeing their seed packets with way too much excitement. So today we're talking about something really practical and honestly kind of exciting: seeds. Specifically, the 10 seeds you really should be starting after February 21st if you want fast, healthy spring growth. Not just any seeds, the ones that will actually reward your patience and give you that satisfying burst of green just when you need it most. I've spent years experimenting with timing, and trust me, starting at the right moment makes a massive difference. Start too early and you end up with leggy, root-bound seedlings that struggle to adapt. Start too late and you lose precious weeks of growing season. But hit that sweet spot right after February 21st and something almost magical happens. The light is improving, indoor temperatures are more stable, and the seeds themselves seem to respond with enthusiasm. Before we dive in, I want to share something a friend of mine, Daisy, told me last spring. She's been gardening for about 15 years and still gets giddy every February. She said, "The moment I pop those first seeds into soil after the 21st, I feel like I'm sending little letters to spring." I love that image. That's exactly what you're doing, sending tiny, hopeful messages forward in time, and spring writes back in green. Now, I do want to mention something quickly. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Seriously, that feedback means the world and helps me keep this content genuinely useful rather than just another generic plant list. Okay, let's get into the seeds. The first one on our list is tomatoes, and if that surprises you, it probably means you've been starting them too late in previous years. Tomatoes need a solid 6 to 8 weeks of indoor growing before they're ready for the garden, which means that if your last frost date falls somewhere in mid to late April, February 21st is almost perfectly timed. Oliver, a gardener I follow online who's been documenting his kitchen garden for the past 5 years, starts his tomatoes on exactly February 22nd every single year. He says the consistency is part of what makes his harvest so reliable. You want to plant your tomato seeds about a 1/4 inch deep in a good seed starting mix. Keep them somewhere warm, around 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and expect germination within 5 to 10 days. Once they sprout, move them to your brightest window or give them a grow light for at least 14 to 16 hours a day. They're hungry for light and will stretch awkwardly if they don't get enough. Don't overwater either. Let the top of the soil dry out slightly between waterings and your little tomato seedlings will thank you with thick, sturdy stems. Peppers are next, and they deserve a special mention because they're often the most underestimated seed on this list when it comes to timing. Peppers, whether you're growing sweet bells or fiery habaneros, are slow to germinate and even slower to grow into transplant-ready plants. They genuinely need 8 to 10 weeks indoors before going outside, sometimes even longer. Starting them right after February 21st is honestly almost cutting it close for many climates. The trick with peppers is soil temperature. They want it warm, around 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit for germination. A seedling heat mat is a game changer here. I remember my first year trying to start peppers on a cold windowsill without any supplemental heat. The seeds just sat there looking at me for almost 3 weeks, doing absolutely nothing, and then only about half of them sprouted. Once I got a heat mat, germination rates jumped dramatically, and the whole process felt so much more rewarding. Give your pepper seeds warmth, patience, and good light, and they will absolutely deliver. Let's talk about eggplant, because this one is wonderfully underrated in home gardens. Eggplant has similar requirements to peppers: warm soil for germination, plenty of light, and a long indoor period before transplanting. Starting seeds around February 21st gives you plants that are ready to go outside right when conditions are perfect. Eggplants are particularly beautiful in garden beds with their deep purple fruits and lush foliage. Rose, who runs a small urban garden on her apartment balcony, grew 3 different varieties of eggplant last year and said they were some of the most productive and decorative plants she had all season. She started them indoors in late February and had gorgeous fruit-heavy plants by midsummer. The key is warmth early on and then consistent watering once they're established outside. Next up is celery, and this one requires a bit of attention to detail because the seeds are incredibly tiny. Celery is a cool season crop that benefits from a long growing period, which is exactly why starting it right after the 21st makes sense. The seeds need light to germinate. Don't cover them with soil. Just press them gently onto the surface of your moistened seed starting mix and cover the tray with a clear plastic dome or some plastic wrap to keep humidity high. Germination can take 2 to 3 weeks, so don't panic if nothing seems to be happening. Once the seeds sprout, they'll grow slowly but steadily, and you'll end up with beautifully crisp celery stalks by midsummer. Celery loves moisture, so don't let the soil dry out, especially once plants are established outdoors. Onions and leeks are absolutely worth starting at this time, and many gardeners miss this window because they assume these crops are direct sow only. Starting them from seed indoors gives you a much longer growing season and bigger, more developed bulbs by harvest time. Onion seeds are planted about a 1/4 inch deep and germinate in 7 to 10 days under warm conditions. Leeks take a similar approach but are even more cold tolerant once transplanted. Ivy, a gardener from the Midwest who has been growing her own vegetables for over a decade, swears by starting her onions and leeks together in the same large flat around February 22nd. She trims the tops of the seedlings regularly as they grow, like a little haircut, which encourages thicker growth and stronger plants. It's a simple trick that makes a noticeable difference. Let's move on to broccoli and its cousins, cauliflower and cabbage. These brassicas are cool season champions that love being planted out while there's still a hint of frost in the air. Starting them indoors in late February means you'll have transplant-ready seedlings just as the garden soil becomes workable. Broccoli is particularly fast-growing indoors. You can expect germination in 3 to 5 days under warm conditions, and within 4 to 6 weeks you'll have sturdy little plants ready for outdoor life. One thing I always remind people, don't start brassicas too early. If they sit indoors too long, they get root-bound and stressed. The late February timing is actually ideal for getting the size right without overdoing it. Lucas, a community garden organizer in his city, always runs a seed-starting workshop the last week of February, and broccoli is always the star of the show because it germinates so quickly and excitedly that even beginners feel like gardening pros. Lettuce and other salad greens are another group you'll want to start right around this time, and they're honestly one of the most rewarding quick wins in all of gardening. Lettuce germinates incredibly fast, sometimes in just 2 to 4 days, and grows quickly under bright light. Starting seeds indoors around February 21st means you could be harvesting baby greens as early as mid to late April, even before your outdoor garden is fully underway. The trick is to start them in a cool spot, around 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, because lettuce actually prefers cooler germination temperatures. Once sprouted, they grow happily in a bright window. You can also do succession planting, starting a new tray every 2 weeks, so you have a continuous harvest rather than a big flush all at once. Herbs deserve a strong mention here because they're incredibly useful and many of them benefit enormously from being started indoors well before the last frost. Parsley in particular is famous for being slow to germinate. It can take 2 to 4 weeks, and many gardeners give up on it thinking the seeds are duds. Starting it after February 21st gives parsley all the time it needs. Basil, on the other hand, is fast but cold sensitive, so it shouldn't go outside until temperatures are reliably warm. Starting basil indoors in late February gives you lush, full plants that are ready to transplant once your garden soil has warmed. Thyme and oregano are slower growers that also benefit from the extra head start. Daisy told me she grows an entire dedicated herb tray every February, and by the time she's transplanting tomatoes outdoors, her herbs are already big enough to start harvesting for the kitchen. That's the kind of garden synchrony that comes from good timing. Flowers often get overlooked in these seed-starting discussions because people assume flowers are just decorative additions rather than essential parts of the garden. But if you want pollinators, beauty, and a garden that feels truly alive, starting the right flowers from seed is absolutely worth it. Snapdragons are a perfect example. They take a long time to reach blooming size from seed, often 12 to 16 weeks, which means starting them after February 21st puts you right on track for spring and early summer flowers. Petunias are another great choice. They need about 10 to 12 weeks indoors. And for something a little different, try starting Lisianthus from seed. They're notoriously tricky and take an extremely long time to grow, but the flowers are absolutely stunning and worth every bit of effort. Rose, who always mixes vegetables and flowers in her balcony garden, says that starting her snapdragons alongside her tomatoes makes the whole growing season feel cohesive and intentional. Cucumbers are a slightly different category. They grow fast and don't like to be transplanted when they're too large, so timing is everything. Starting cucumber seeds about 3 to 4 weeks before your last frost date is ideal. If your last frost is around mid-April, that means late February to early March is exactly right. Cucumbers germinate within 3 to 7 days under warm conditions and grow rapidly after that. The key is to not let them get root-bound in their starting containers. Use biodegradable pots that you can plant directly into the soil without disturbing the roots, and your cucumbers will barely even notice they were moved. They're vigorous plants that reward good timing and consistent watering with an almost embarrassingly generous harvest. Now, a few general tips that apply across all of these seeds. Label everything. I know it sounds obvious, but in the excitement of seed starting season, it is shocking how easy it is to mix up your trays and completely forget what's what. I once had a whole tray of mystery seedlings that I was almost certain were basil, but turned out to be a mix of parsley and thyme. Labels save sanity. Also, invest in a quality seed starting mix. It really does matter. Regular potting soil is too dense and can hold too much moisture, leading to damping off disease, which is a fungal problem that kills seedlings right at soil level. Seed starting mix is lighter, better draining, and designed specifically for this stage of plant life. Watering technique makes a huge difference too. Bottom watering, setting your seed trays in a shallow dish of water and letting them absorb moisture from below, is one of the best habits you can build. It prevents the surface of the soil from getting too wet, which reduces fungal issues and encourages roots to grow downward toward the moisture. Daisy introduced me to bottom watering about 4 years ago, and I never went back. Top watering with a gentle spray bottle is fine too, but bottom watering just feels more controlled and plant-friendly. Light is genuinely the biggest limiting factor for most indoor seed starters. Even the sunniest south-facing window often doesn't provide enough light intensity during late February, especially in more northern latitudes. A simple, inexpensive LED grow light set on a timer for 16 hours a day makes an enormous difference in seedling quality. Plants grown under good light are compact, sturdy, and green. Plants grown without enough light are tall, pale, and floppy, what gardeners call leggy, and they struggle when transplanted outdoors. If you invest in just one piece of seed starting equipment this year, make it a grow light. Don't forget about hardening off, which is the process of gradually introducing your indoor seedlings to outdoor conditions before transplanting them permanently. Seedlings grown indoors have been living in a sheltered, stable environment, and suddenly moving them to a breezy, sunnier, more variable outdoor space is genuinely stressful for them. About a week to 10 days before transplanting, start bringing them outside for just an hour or two in a sheltered spot, not in direct afternoon sun, and gradually increase the time and sun exposure each day. Lucas always does a 2-week hardening off process with his community garden students, and he says the difference in survival rate between hardened and non-hardened transplants is remarkable. It's a small investment of time with a very big payoff. One more thing I want to mention because it came up so naturally in conversations with several gardening friends, the emotional side of seed starting. This might sound a little soft for a practical gardening guide, but hear me out. There's something genuinely restorative about tending seedlings in late February when everything outside still looks grey and dormant. Ivy said once that her seed trays are basically her mental health plan for late winter, and I completely understand that. The daily ritual of checking for new sprouts, adjusting lights, misting trays, it connects you to something slow and natural and hopeful in a way that feels really grounding. So even if your garden is small, even if you only have space for a few pots on a balcony, starting seeds is worth it for the experience alone, not just the harvest. Something I haven't talked about yet is soil temperature versus air temperature, and this distinction matters more than most beginners realize. When we say tomatoes like 70 to 75 degrees for germination, we mean the temperature of the soil itself, not the room. Your room might feel warm and comfortable at 68 degrees, but the soil in a plastic tray sitting on a hard surface near a window can be several degrees cooler than that, sometimes significantly cooler. This is one of the reasons a seedling heat mat is such a practical investment. It warms the soil from below, creating exactly the microenvironment that seeds need to wake up and germinate confidently. You don't need a fancy thermometer, though having a simple soil probe thermometer is genuinely useful. Even just moving your seed trays off a cold surface, like a tile floor or a concrete countertop, onto something insulating like a folded towel or a wooden board can noticeably improve germination rates. These small adjustments add up. Let's also talk about containers, because this is another area where gardeners sometimes make things harder for themselves than necessary. Cell trays with individual compartments are fantastic for most seeds because each seedling gets its own space, and you minimize root disturbance when transplanting. For seeds that really hate being disturbed, cucumbers, squash, and to some extent melons, individual biodegradable pots or compressed peat pellets are your best friend. Oliver swears by peat pellets for his cucumbers because he can drop the entire pellet into the garden bed and the roots grow right through the walls without any shock. For tomatoes and peppers, he starts in small cells and then up-pots into larger containers once the plants are a few inches tall, which gives the roots room to expand and keeps the plants growing vigorously. The up-potting step is something a lot of beginners skip, and it can make a real difference in the final size and strength of your transplants. Speaking of tomatoes, let's go a little deeper on variety selection because it genuinely affects your success. Determinate tomato varieties, the kind that grow to a set size and ripen all their fruit around the same time, tend to be more compact and manageable for small spaces. Indeterminate varieties keep growing and producing all season but need staking, caging, or some form of support. If you're new to growing tomatoes from seed, cherry tomato varieties are almost always a great starting point. They germinate reliably, grow quickly, tolerate a bit of neglect better than larger varieties, and produce abundantly from midsummer until frost. Daisy grows sun gold cherry tomatoes every single year without fail, because as she puts it, they taste like candy and they never let me down. That reliability is really valuable when you're building your gardening confidence. Pepper variety selection is equally important and worth a moment of thought. If you've never grown peppers from seed before, sweet bell peppers are gratifying but require a long, warm season to produce well. A faster maturing sweet pepper like lipstick or Carmen might suit you better in climates with shorter summers. If you love heat, jalapenos are actually one of the more beginner-friendly hot peppers. They germinate relatively quickly, grow vigorously, and produce a large number of fruits. For the truly adventurous, starting a habanero or ghost pepper from seed is a multi-month commitment. But the satisfaction of successfully growing something so intensely flavored from a tiny seed is genuinely remarkable. Lucas once brought a jar of homemade habanero hot sauce to a community garden potluck, made entirely from peppers he had started from seed in late February. It was by all accounts absolutely delicious and absolutely dangerous. Let's circle back to flowers for a moment because I want to expand on why they matter beyond just looking pretty. Flowers in and around your vegetable garden serve real functional purposes. Marigolds, for example, are classic companion plants that help deter certain pests when planted near tomatoes and peppers. Starting marigold seeds indoors in late February gives you robust plants to tuck in between your vegetables when transplant time comes. Nasturtiums are another dual-purpose plant. Their flowers are edible. They attract aphids away from your vegetables, acting as a trap crop, and they add a gorgeous burst of orange and yellow to any garden space. Zinnias, started indoors in late February, will be blooming by late spring and will attract so many pollinators to your garden that your vegetable plants will thank you with better fruit set and bigger yields. Rose started including zinnias in her balcony garden 3 years ago, specifically for this reason, and she noticed a measurable improvement in how well her cucumbers and squash produced that same season. There's also the question of where to buy your seeds, and while this might seem like a minor detail, it actually matters quite a bit. Fresh seeds from a reputable seed company will always out-germinate old seeds from a bargain bin. Most seed packets include a packed-for year on them. Seeds packed for the current year are going to be at their freshest and most vigorous. That said, many seeds remain viable for several years when stored properly in a cool, dry, dark location. Pepper seeds can last 2 to 3 years in good storage. Tomato seeds are often viable for 4 to 5 years. Onion seeds, however, have notoriously short viability and really should be used within 1 to 2 years for best results. If you're pulling out seeds from last year or beyond, doing a quick germination test before committing them to your main seed starting effort is a smart move. Just dampen a paper towel, place 10 seeds on it, fold it over, seal it in a plastic bag, and check it in a warm spot after the expected germination time. Count how many sprout, and you'll have a rough germination rate percentage to work with. Soil amendments are something that experienced gardeners talk about a lot, but beginners often find the topic overwhelming. For seed starting specifically, the honest truth is that you don't need to add much of anything to a good quality seed starting mix. The mix itself is formulated to be nutritionally light, which is actually intentional. Seedlings get everything they need from the seed itself for the first week or two of life, and too much fertilizer at this stage can actually burn tender roots. Once your seedlings have developed their first set of true leaves, not the initial seed leaves, but the second set that looks like the actual mature plant leaves, that's when you can start giving them a very diluted liquid fertilizer. Something like a half-strength balanced fertilizer every week or two is plenty. Daisy uses a simple diluted fish emulsion fertilizer on her seedlings and says her plants always look deep green and healthy by transplant time. It smells terrible, she admits, but the results speak for themselves. As we really wrap things up now, I want to come back to something that I think is the real heart of this whole conversation: the joy of growing something from seed. There's a specific kind of pride that comes from planting a tiny seed, watching it germinate, nursing it through its early weeks, hardening it off, transplanting it into the garden. And then, weeks or months later, harvesting something you can eat, display, or simply enjoy looking at. That whole arc from seed to harvest is deeply satisfying in a way that buying transplants from a garden centre never quite matches. Not that there's anything wrong with buying transplants. Sometimes that's exactly the right move. But if you've never experienced the full journey from seed to table, I genuinely encourage you to try it this season. Start small if you need to. 1 tomato plant, 1 pot of basil, 1 tray of lettuce. Just start. And remember, gardening is not about perfection. Some seeds won't germinate. Some seedlings will damp off or get leggy or just refuse to cooperate. That's normal. That's gardening. Every single gardener you admire has killed plants, had failed seasons, and made mistakes. What separates the thriving gardeners from the ones who give up is simply the willingness to try again next year with the knowledge gained from this year. Ivy told me that her worst gardening season, the year a late frost killed almost everything she had spent weeks growing from seed, was also the year she learned the most about timing, frost protection, and resilience. She came back the following season with a cold frame and a much deeper respect for weather patterns, and that season was one of her most productive ever. So, go get those seeds. Check your calendar, note your last frost date, count back your weeks, and get your trays ready. February 21st is right around the corner, and spring is absolutely on its way. We'll see you out there in the garden, happy, dirty-handed, and surrounded by green. Thanks for being part of the Botanic Haven community. You make this so worth it.